I created this really brilliantly complicated fund that I wanted to start, and it was going to do all these great things in the world, and it was going to be huge. It was legally perfect, right? But I could not make investors understand it because it was too complicated. And it failed miserably. And I chased that failure for years because I'm like, no, people had put some money into it, not.
Welcome everyone to Adapt or Die, Transformative Leadership Conversation. I'm Andreas Pettersson. I'm a former tech CEO. I turned executive coach, and I'm the founder of Leaders Adapt. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm going to start with a quote from your book, and I'm going to hold it up here on purpose. It's early chapters. I'm still early chapters, but in the spirit of Adapt or Die, I absolutely love this quote, and I want to hear what it means to you. We cannot shame ourselves into change. We can only love ourselves into evolution. Why did you pick that quote, and what does it mean to you?
Because, I spent years, and I think a lot of us do this when we're younger, beating ourselves up and being our harshest critic. And I realized that wasn't really serving me any longer. I respond better to more positive reinforcement than negative reinforcement, and yet I was doing it to myself. And so this whole idea of either whether it's your parents or yourself, or a boss or somebody else, usually yourself, giving negative criticism and feedback and shaming you into something isn't really the way to get the best out of people, I don't believe. And so I found that quote to be really meaningful to me because it's like the way you want to grow should be in love. I don't believe in kind of beating people up to get them to grow. I guess I'd be terrible in the military.
I love that answer. In your book as well, I actually earmarked multiple pages. I have to admit, I'm 3 chapters in. I think I've earmarked probably 3-4 pages here in the first few chapters. You were talking about how you sort of tackle life a lot yourself through learning to meditate, learning to focus, learning to really keep fighting and keep grinding and working really hard for what you believe in. Without spoiling the book, how are you evolving that concept throughout the book, and what are you telling others to do?
I think the biggest lesson throughout the entire book is while you do have to work hard and there is no shortcut for hard work, there is a shortcut for having to figure everything out, and you don't have to do that all by yourself. And I think probably the most important thing that I've learned throughout my life is that while you do have to work hard, that doesn't have to suck. You can work hard and enjoy your life. The grind doesn't have to suck. It doesn't mean struggle and strife and being miserable. If you know what you're working towards, it can really light you up to work hard. So when I work till 10, 11, 12 at night sometimes, because I'm building something that I'm really super excited about and proud to deliver into the world, like the book, I don't feel like I'm grinding and miserable. I'm excited to bring it to life. And so the biggest message of the book is, yeah, you got to work hard. There's no shortcut for that, but it doesn't have to suck.
Love it. You talk a lot about, in the beginning, about mindset as well. Tell me how being part of different communities, being part of different masterclasses and so on, really changed the trajectory of how you do things. And then also, please talk a little bit about the book and what it's about and why people should read it.
Well, so we can start with that. The book it's called The Power of OPE, Other People's Everything. And that was kind of born of, I make a lot of my living helping people leverage OPM, other people's money. And you hear that talked about all the time. That's been around for a long time. I didn't make it up. But I realized in doing that there's so much more that goes into a successful business and a successful life than just money, right? And if you can leverage other people's everything, and that really also, by the way, means figuring out what your thing is and daydreaming a little bit and giving yourself permission to figure out what lights you up and what you're amazing at. And then the goal in life, usually for most of us, is to spend as much time as possible doing only that, and as little time as possible doing anything else. And that means you're going to need other people to do all those other things. Stuff still has to get done. It doesn't all have to get done by you. And that is really the main theme throughout the entire book. And it is something that I did learn when I finally started looking inward, meditating, listening to my inner voice, and also getting outside coaching as well. And the best money I ever spent on myself was on coaches. And that is how you expand your mindset. And I like group coaching as well as individual coaching because you can kind of get in this sort of crap, or you get a little bit stuck when it's always just you, right? And so I like the group coaching as well, retreats, masterminds, that kind of thing, because you're around like-minded people and you start to see things from different lenses, other people's everything, right? And I think that is the best way to grow and expand your mindset exponentially, because you're now around other people that are doing stuff and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't even think that I could do it that way, because you're stuck in your own belief system, right? And our belief systems, they're generally formed 0 to 5. And it's a survival mechanism. It's what you need to do to survive that period. But after you start to grow, you figure out some of those beliefs were survival beliefs that don't really work for me in the life that I want. I really think that being in a mastermind, having a coach, someone that can guide you through those processes just makes it easier, faster, more fun. It's more fun to do stuff with other people if they're the right other people.
I agree. I have a very similar mindset in so many directions I want to take this conversation, but I'll just spin upon the importance of being part of a group and doing it, and then also the coping mechanism. I think, have you heard of the baby elephant story?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So, do you know why adult elephants never run away from the circus?
Why?
Because when they're small, they are chained. They get this massive chain around their neck, and they drive a big ass pole in the ground, and they tie the chain to it. And every time the elephants stand up, they smack straight down in the ground, and they're in pain. They learn that if I run away, I get instant pain. That's why the reminder are there often on circus elephants. They don't have chains, but they do put some weight around their neck. It's usually a weighted something that just goes with the show. It's a reminder, don't run away. The reason why I mention that is coping mechanisms from an early childhood often stick with you. And it's not until others, for me at least, pointed them out, I finally realized, what the hell am I doing? Yeah. And I think masterminds have that, coaches have that ability. So when I read that in the book, I'm like, you should be a spokesperson for what I'm doing. Like, this was a great, this is a good marketing tool for me. I maybe should start giving away to people of why they should sign up. But let me ask you this question. How do you build up the courage to ask? How do you build up the courage to have a difference? Do you have to experience really hard things in life, or can you actually do it without experiencing hard things?
So this is actually a really good thought experiment, because I grew up experiencing hard things in my life when I was young. We were poor, divorced parents, addicted parents, that kind of thing. So I grew up experiencing hard things, and I think I turned out okay and did a fair amount of work to sort of overcome that. And everyone says, oh, it builds character or whatever. And now I have a daughter who's just graduating literally this week, and she's going to enter into the world. She's not really experienced a lot of hard things. And my sister and I just had this conversation last week of, I guess it'll be a really good experiment that I'm pushing her out into the world not having experienced really hard things. And I started thinking about that, and because she's a well-adapted, kind person. She's ambitious. She's good things, so I'm thinking, well, maybe you don't have to have struggle and strife in your life to have a good life and be a good person and have character. I guess we'll see. She's a good example of that. And I thought about it, and I thought, we're humans, and whatever experiences we have are still only shaped, like you said, the baby elephant, right? They're shaped by our worldview. In her mind, even a minor inconvenience can feel like a little bit of a struggle to her because she doesn't know any different. And so I think we do have this ability to adapt and grow and thrive without having it be this horrible traumatic event, because our brains don't know the difference yet, right? And so I don't know if I'm making really a lot of sense.
You're making a lot of sense. Perfect sense, actually.
I feel like we don't have to, I know parents have said to me, like, oh, I want to help them build character and they need to have enough adversity. And I'm like, well, I think the human experience is enough adversity. We don't have to manufacture adversity, I guess. And I think it's our job as parents to minimize the adversity for our children. I don't want her to struggle just because I did. That feels like a horrible lesson to me personally. I'm not telling anyone else how they should parent, but for me personally, I don't know. She seemed like a pretty good person to me, and she's had a pretty easy life, all things considered.
And it's something I think about a lot, Bethany, because I got 3 boys, and I'm just like you. I grew up poor, or I grew up in as poor as you can grow up in Sweden, maybe, I don't know. There was a lot of, how do I say, we parented ourselves and so on. And some days I'm sitting and thinking, like, am I giving my kids everything? Are they having enough struggles in life? But like you said, everything is relative, right? So they just start, I think of them as plateaus. I started at one plateau, I got to another plateau. Now my children started here, but they will still get to another plateau that I can't comprehend today. And I think we'll be fine. But with that said, throughout your life, when was sort of that moment where you had the biggest, I got to change something, I got to do something different, this is not working for me anymore? Have you had those moments?
I've had several, like you said, plateaus,
Mm.
right? So you kind of get to the top and you're like, okay, I'm okay. And then you're like, wait, this isn't great either. Then you get to the next one, right? But I think the biggest one was really not that long ago. Actually, I'm going to say maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I left the practice of law temporarily to launch a fund. And I'm not sure if you're to that part yet in the book. You might not be.
No.
And I left there and I was like, you know what? I've been practicing law, I've been watching all this. I'm going to launch this fund. And I created this really brilliantly complicated fund that I wanted to start. And it was going to do all these great things in the world. And it was going to be huge. And it was legally perfect, right? But I could not make investors understand it because it was too complicated. And it failed miserably. And I chased that failure for years because I'm like, no, people had put some money into it. Not a ton of money. Luckily, I didn't raise 50 million like I had intended. So thank goodness it wasn't a $50 million loss. It was just a fraction of that, but it was still some people's money. I put myself into debt trying to chase and make that work so that I wouldn't have lost people's money. I ruined my credit. I mean, I gave up everything to try to make this right. It was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I failed and people were pretty mad at me. And it wasn't actually all my fault that it failed, but I felt like it was at least partially my responsibility, right? To make it right. And I think that's also a really good lesson too, is how much of that was my responsibility. I mean, there was a team of people, we all failed together, including the people who put money in. And I was taking that burden on all by myself, right? And I had this sort of mindset of, I can never succeed now because I failed and they lost money. What's going to happen when I succeed without them now?
Mhm.
And so I kept myself stuck in failure for a while, right? And at this point, I'm like, okay, well, my credit sucks now. I don't have any more savings. I'm going to have to go back and practice law or something again. And I didn't want to. I was like burned out and all the things. And I met my former partner, Mauricio, during this time. And he was looking for someone to help him through another different life crisis and help him run his firm. And I said, well, I'm done practicing law, but I'll help you for a little while. I got to make a little bit of money. This is easy for me, you know, and I started working and working with clients doing real estate. And I started having a little bit more success. And at first I was like, ooh, I want to be behind the scenes. I don't want anybody to see me thriving because who the hell am I to thrive now after such an epic failure, right? Somehow decided I was going to spend some money on some coaching. Like, I got to get out of this. I've got to make more money. I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I started realizing, I'm like, who the hell am I not to succeed at this point? I'm not helping that. Wayne Dyer had a really good quote. It's also in the book. And that is something along the lines of, how bad do I have to feel to make it better for them? Like, what does me feeling bad do to help them make their money back or to not have had that failure? And, you know, they wanted to be mad at me, and it was, you know, again, partially my responsibility, but not really my fault. And it didn't matter to me. And I thought, you know, who am I to not succeed? I have a child watching me, you know, I've got to figure this out. And so that was the biggest moment for me of, no, I have to succeed. I learned all the things I needed to learn from that lesson. And now what do I need to put into place to take that and move on to the next thing in my life and give myself permission to succeed? And then I realized that was literally the only thing in my way, was my own damn permission.
Wow.
Which, how silly is that? I was like those elephants, actually, you know? It's so funny. I had never heard that story and you say it and now it's like, oh yeah. I was like those elephants. I was like, I'm stuck right here because I wouldn't even give myself permission to go outside of this own little circle of bubble of failure. And once I figured that out, it was like skyrocket so fast.
That's amazing. And I mean, most people, I don't want to burn too many, but there is a lot of people out there who wouldn't care or give a S about losing other people's money. And I think integrity is what wins in the long run. And just for the fact that you have that experience, I would argue you're more investable than most people, because not only did you feel the pain, but you also moved on a personal level and you overcame it. But it's still going to be a scar that will be reminding you, no matter what you do, it just doesn't slow you down. So you turn a wound turned into a scar that turned into a muscle.
Yeah.
So now it's a muscle, but others will know that you have it, which makes you way more investable than, I want to say, 9 out of 10 people I meet.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because I always tell passive investors who ask me, like, what do I look for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what should I be looking for in operators? And the answer is, and I wasn't even thinking of myself when I said this, but I guess I qualify too. The answer is not someone who's never lost before or had a failure or a setback before. It's how do they deal with it when they do? And in fact, like you said, I would rather have someone who's already made mistakes and aren't making their first mistakes on my dime.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how do you ask the hard questions? How do you come through the other side and handle a setback? Because if you're in this game, any game long enough, you're going to have failures. You're going to have setbacks. It's just going to happen. That's life. Right. So how do you deal with it? And I think you're right. A lot of people don't care if they've lost someone else's money. And I think I am a better steward of people's money now because I have felt the sting of, oof, will I lose money again? Probably at some point. But now what I do is I build so that I can weather a storm versus having to be a complete, wipeout.
This is so relevant for me right now, Bethany, because we acquired Arvik Art in Texas, and it has been so much work, more than I anticipated. Everything from dealing with finding the right manager, having to fire a manager. It's been a lot more work, and it makes me sleepless at night, feeling I can do more for other people's money that I have raised. And we're on a good trajectory. It's not that. I'm just extremely result-oriented. So if I have promised something, I'm not happy until I've got it. So hearing this story, it's actually inspiring for me because I am doing all I can to get there, and I have a big chunk of money in it myself. With that said, it is heading in the right direction. I just want to overperform. But I can relate to sort of that stress and the pressure you put on yourself. But like I said, I've also seen a lot of people who don't. When have you walked away from a partnership because your core values, integrity, something else have been off? Have you ever done that?
I have. Actually, this exact fund I was telling you about, I had a bad partnership there.
Mm-hmm.
And I left that partnership and still continue to try to make this work for the people who lost their money, and so that was one where it was just out of alignment with me. So yeah, I've done it for sure. And I highly recommend that people do that routinely. Pruning. You prune a rose bush, right? You pruning is required in your life. You're going to outgrow people, places, and even past versions of yourself. You're going to. That's evolution, right? And that's advice that I give to my daughter. It's advice I give to clients. I would encourage people to do it faster than I did, be mindful always of not always looking for what's the next best thing. I do think that's a little bit of a problem in our culture right now is we're always looking for the next best thing. That's not what I mean. I mean, always be mindful of how you're growing and with whom, and make sure that you're all growing in the same direction.
Love that. Spoken like a leader, what's your biggest leadership transformation? And not just as a lawyer. I'm talking like leader for your businesses, leader of the book, leader of whatever. Biggest leadership lesson so far in transformation?
Learning to let go. I was a bit of a control freak, and I don't want to be a micromanager. I'm not a micromanager. And I want a team around me that is empowered and not controlled. And so learning to let go, I think, was the most important thing to become a good leader.
What's the brand you're trying to build right now? Like the brand around you. Who are you? Why the book? What's next? What's happening?
It's really interesting that you asked this question right now, because I actually just rewrote, I guess writing is the accurate way to say that, rewrote my sort of brand identity because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just the SEC lawyer, right? Because I'm doing other things. I think that my brand really is, I am the advisor and the strategist to people who are either trying to build wealth from nothing or rebuild wealth after a setback or a loss, or take their wealth and create some epic, extraordinary stuff with it. So it's sort of the three phases of growth in learning how to create wealth. And because I think wealth can be and should be accessible to everyone.
I agree. And you shouldn't get stuck in one area. And I'm with you. And I kind of knew this from talking and meeting you a couple of times now. How does success look for you? So let's say that you succeed with your plan. How far out are we in the future? What does your life look like, say 3 years from now?
3 years from now, and I am on that trajectory. 3 years from now, I will be traveling around the world to properties we own, hosting retreats, teaching other people how to create wealth, but doing it from fun, epic places, doing fun, epic stuff.
What's epic? Tell me.
And that's everybody's decision to decide for themselves. For me, it is having life experiences over things and having the freedom to go anywhere in the world with whomever I want in the world and just be without having to be tied to, I'm supposed to be doing something else. I don't let anybody should all over me anymore. So nobody gets to should all over me. I get to go do whatever I feel like I want to be doing and not feeling like I should be doing something else for someone else.
And we kind of hinted to this conversation before we started recording this podcast, and I don't want to say exactly what you said there, but what advice would you give someone, let's say in their early 20s, woman, man, doesn't matter. What 3 advices would you give them so people are not shitting all over you?
I would say, 1, figure out what you're amazing at and what lights you up both. And that's your lane. I would say that, stay in your lane. And then spend as much of your time and energy doing things from your lane as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You still need to know what's going on in the other lanes, but fill those other lanes with people that you know, like, and trust, and let them do their thing. And it's very important to note that I'm not saying don't ever help other people. I'm saying don't help other people by jumping into their lane and doing the things that they ought to be doing from their lane, because you're both going to drown, right? Do what you can do from your lane to help people, because that's the best way to show up for everybody. I don't know how many pieces of advice that was. It felt like 3. But I think you have to give yourself permission, though. This is, to me, the biggest lesson. Give yourself permission to do whatever it is. Give yourself permission to decide what your lane is, and also decide that you can spend as much of your time and energy as possible doing only that, right? Because I used to do that. Like, who do I think I am to be thinking that I get to do what I want all the time, right? Well, why not? People do.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I love it. May I ask, how old is your daughter?
She's 17. She's graduating, by the way, in 3 days from high school.
Stressful. Yeah. Okay. And what's she up to next?
She's going to college. She decided she wants to go to a 4-year university. She's staying fairly close to home. So she'll be only about 30 minutes away, which I'm excited about. And she's going to study business administration, because I will say that she has listened to me, and, teenagers don't always listen to their mothers, but she has listened to me in that I told her, you don't have to figure out your forever thing. Just figure out your next thing. And if you learn how to create a sustainable business, there can be plenty of next things to fill that. So it doesn't matter what the substance of that business is. Learn how to create a sustainable business, and then you can change your mind on what that is going forward.
I think that's such a powerful advice, Bethany. I meet a lot of younger people, especially people who reach out on social media, or I just stumble upon them on events. And for some reason, I don't know if it's a school system here in US or what it is, but it's like they're stuck in their mind. Like, I have one choice in life and then I'm stuck with it.
Yeah. I don't know where or how that happened, but you're right. I think that's a lot of kids just get stuck with. Or when I was growing up, it was you go to college or you join the military. That's it. Those are the only choices. And it's like, well, that's
very American way.
Yeah. And I'm like, those are not the only choices, actually.
No.
They're definitely not a choice for everybody.
I love this. Have you seen the TED Talk with Sir Ken Robbins, Changing the Education Paradigm? It's one of the most viewed TED Talks ever.
No, I have not.
Please look at it. It is amazing. But it's about letting people be who they are, but then also not trying to conform them into the 9-to-5 mindset, and there's a bell ringing and now it's time to go to break and now you have to come back. Like, it's like we're training factory workers,
right?
And the school system is built around that. But anyway, he gives an amazing speech at a tech talk highlighting sort of how do we change the education paradigm and how do we let people be who they are, let the rebellions rebel, but still not put them in a box for the rest of your life. I am asking a little bit out of personal reasons, because my oldest, he's only 12, but he is, how do I say, I worry for the day that he goes off to college already, because he's a very strong-minded individual, and once he sets his mind to something, it's hard to change him. So let's see what happens. Yeah. He, on the other hand, have decided he's going to move to Sweden, and he's going to study at the Royal Engineering Academy University in Sweden.
Love
and
it.
I'm not sure I want that. So I need to find a way how to keep him closer. But anyway, so we kind of covered sort of the challenges. We covered a little bit about adaptation. We talked a little bit about your success and what your future success is. But I want to hear a little bit more about the book. Who should be reading the book? Why do you think everyone should read it? And is this something you're going to keep doing?
The book was written for any entrepreneur, not just real estate people, not just people who've already made it, any entrepreneur, whether you're getting started or whether you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I move past this particular plateau, right? Whether it's scaling or now you're just looking for epic experiences. It really is written for every entrepreneur, because I think you're right. When you mention the education system, we are trained a certain way and our mindset is a certain way where it's tough to think about letting other people help us as entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy to me. I tell a story in the book about growing up. I asked my dad for help with my homework. I was like 8 or 9 years old and I asked for help with my homework. And his answer to me was, "You're a smart girl. You can figure it out." And I was like, okay, I'm smart. And I always knew I was smart. So he did that for me. And that was wonderful that I was like, oh, I'm smart. Okay. And I did figure it out. And then I realized, okay, I have to figure everything out for myself. Right. And looking back as an adult, he probably just didn't know the answer. It wasn't some crazy enlightenment that he was trying to bestow upon me. He was a 17-year-old father. Well, by then I was a little older, right? But he was a teen father. So he's just trying to figure it out, right? But I took this to be some major life event of, oh my God, I have to figure everything out for myself. And I did that for ages. And I think if we just would teach kids or even now adults, you get to ask for help. In fact, you should ask for help. And as the lawyer, I will tell you, you're safer, legally speaking, when you ask for help, right? Because doing stuff you suck at, it's not exactly safe, legally speaking. And so I think it's for all entrepreneurs at any stage. And learning how to ask for help, I think, is one of the most critical things that we can do. And yes, I will keep writing because I actually really genuinely like to write. I do.
Remember you telling me. And for the listeners of this, Bethany was nice to invite me to her book launch. I told her at the book launch, even though she was super busy, she took the time to talk to me and everyone else. And I said, I've been wanting to write a book by myself for a long time, but I'm afraid to sort of be judged. And this comes from a guy who is never afraid. Like, I just jump out of airplanes and figure out how to build a parachute on the way down. But it was a mental blocker. You remember what you told me?
People are going to judge you no matter what. You might as well be doing something that you love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I've done it for the last few months, and I read the first draft this weekend. And it's scary.
I'm so excited for you.
So you were absolutely the catalyst there, Bethany, because that was the moment I'm like, I'm doing it. But I think so. But what I really did is what you talk about in the book. I seeked another person's opinion, even though we barely knew one another. But it was still, I asked, and you can look at it as selfish, but I asked, here is my blocker. How did you overcome it? And I think that courage, if you just take one micro action, it can have a big impact on your trajectory. And most entrepreneurs I meet, they're like, no, I have to suffer in silence and I just have to keep grinding. And it doesn't work that way. And that's why from my perspective, you should read this book. At least I think if someone reads your book and they start actually asking other people for help, like that gotta be a win for you.
It is. And I'll tell you, I did not write this book to just be a business card to tell people I wrote a book. I really do want people to read it and I want it to help people. And I think it will.
It will.
Some things that it took me so long to learn. And it's like, this is why I tell my daughter, you can make your own fresh new mistakes. Just don't make the same ones I made, because I'm here to teach you. I'm here to tell you that you don't need to. And I feel like we can shortcut so many things. And like I said at the beginning, we can't shortcut the hard work. There's going to have to be hard work, but it does not have to suck. There's just no reason for it.
I'm going to say the same. I'm only a few chapters in and I had a reading backlog. I will let you know the outcome, but so far I'm loving it. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking like, okay, this is a promotion for a lot of entrepreneurship. They're more, so I'm not kidding. I earmarked several pages there. So there's quotes I might be lending for my own book. But anyway, let's go into a little bit quick lightning round. Let me ask you a few questions, really quick answers.
Okay.
What myth do you fail to recognize in yourself?
The morning routine. I cannot subscribe to some specific morning routine that makes everybody successful. Getting up at 3 a.m. and posting about it, and taking the cold plunge first and posting about it, and then writing in your journal for an hour and then posting about it. Like, that doesn't work for me. I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. Not interested in doing that. And by the way, that's not good for everyone's body. Like, I have a fitness ring that tells me when my best sleep time is, and it's like 11:30 to 6:30. It's not, and those people who get up at 3, they go to bed at 7, by the way. So it's the routine. I think it's garbage.
I agree. I think the people that are subscribing to it, they're really busy with other people's requests and opinions. I don't subscribe to it either. I'm very adaptive, obviously, like the name of the podcast. When I was a CEO and we had 150 people chasing me, one of the few times I got something done was either when I stayed up really late or went up really early. That's how I got all the tactical work done before the phone started ringing. But it only worked so far until, like me, who had people in Europe and people in Asia, and I worked in this time zone. That means it's 24/7. It took me years to understand that. But I'm with you. The morning routine, no. Like, do what's worked for you. Okay, one mistake you keep making that you wished you stopped.
I am slow to let people go. I'm slow to let people go in life generally, not just like, my team at work is really great now, but I want to always see the best in people, and I want to give people too many chances, and that's not always healthy to do. So I'm pretty slow to let go.
You're compromising your own value whenever you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hire slow, fire fast. Okay.
Right.
If you are really under pressure and you're like, you really feel it, what's the mantra you go to?
I can do hard things. The one thing that I recognize patterns, right? And I think a lot of us in this space probably do. And ever since I was young, I would complete something that I thought was going to be this impossible task, right? And I got to the other side of it. And every single time that I got to the other side of something, I realized that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I did okay, right? And I started to recognize that as a pattern in myself. And so when I get in my head about things and I'm overwhelmed, first of all, I stop and I ask myself, what triggered that anxiety feeling? Because I worked through this already. So why am I feeling like this, right? So I look back and think about what triggered it. And then I remind myself that I've done a whole bunch of hard things and it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I love it. I'll skip my last question because that was kind of a mic drop. I agree 1,000%. Bethany, thank you so much for our conversation today. I haven't known you that long, but you are someone who clearly already had an impact on my life, and I will be grateful for that forever. You gave me the courage to write my book. I also think that a lot of people could benefit from reading your book. They can absolutely benefit from the mindset changes that comes with the book. And we talked about several of them here today. But where can people find you, and where can they find your book?
So the best place to find me actually is on Instagram, because there's a link to everything that I'm doing on Instagram. So it's Bethany_LaFlam, and the book is sold everywhere. Amazon's probably the easiest.
And what other reasons should people be reaching out to you in addition to the book?
I am a securities lawyer for real estate investors. So if you're raising other people's money, OPM, it's chapter 4, by the way. If you're raising other people's money, then our firm, Premier Law Group, can help you do that safely. And then, of course, the Conscious Capital Collective is a community that I created for any entrepreneur looking to create whatever their next level of wealth is and doing it without burnout.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Everyone else who's listening, this is Adapt or Die, the podcast where we meet in very inspiring people like Bethany. I think there are so many nuggets from this conversation. I'm actually sitting here and spinning right now about what my next change will be. You actually said something I might be adapting here quickly. If you want to reach out to me, you can always find this podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on all the other platforms. But you can also go to Instagram and you can find me at Andreas, the CEO. Please, please, please leave a 5-star review on the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. It helps other leaders find the podcast, and it gives them the tools and the nuggets so they don't have to screw things up like I have over the years, or like some of my guests. You get to learn from them and you get to live 1,000 years instead of 100 years. Again, thank you so much, Bethany. Super good conversation. Until next time.
Appreciate you.